going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Monday Challenge. Today, we're going to be making a simple logo animation in Adobe After Effects. If you watched last week's episode, you know that we did a little behind the scenes of using available light during a TV commercial shoot. And on today's episode, we're actually going to be animating the logo for that commercial. This is a pretty simple logo animation that we're going to be doing. The only thing that we're really going to be messing with is the scale and maybe a little bit of rotation. So this is kind of a beginner crash course on how to set up a logo in Illustrator so that you can animate it in After Effects. First thing you're going to want to make sure you get from the client is the vector file, whether that's a PDF, an EPS, or an Illustrator file. So we have our logo right here. We're going to right click and open with Adobe Illustrator. So here's our logo. And the first thing that we're going to need to do is just make sure that we convert it to RGB. Chances are, if you get a logo, it's probably created in CYMK, and if you brought that into After Effects without changing it to RGB, your colors may not be exact. So I will just select everything and then go to Edit Colors, and Convert to RGB. Next step, we're going to create a new file, and this is basically creating the composition in After Effects. So what I like to do is create the file as a 4K file and then organize all the layers from there. So you can see my recents here. I use this 4K one, so if you come up to Film and Video and then you just click 4K UHD, that should be exactly what you need. Now the actual commercial is actually going to be a 1080p sequence. The reason is because for the local broadcasting stations that we upload to, they only require 1080p. So even though I'm creating this file in 4K, we will just be able to shrink it down. And the reason I like to do that is just really future-proofing ourselves, just in the instance that we ever would need this logo animated in a 4K project or whatever down the road. Come back into our original file, select everything, Command-C to copy, and paste it into the new file. I scale everything up by holding Shift and Option. And it should be center, but if it's not, I will just vertical and horizontal align the center. So the next step is to create a layer of each of the objects that you're going to be animating. So if we open this up here, we can see we have all of the attributes, the vector files, all that stuff. And I'm going to be animating pretty much everything. The only thing that I'm going to leave together is the since 1939, 11 total layers. So we'll just come down to this little thing right here and click this 10 times because we already have a layer. And now from here, I'm just going to rename all the layers to match accordingly to what that layer will be. Now, if we open up our main layer here with all the files in it, you will see that it's not exactly in the order that I laid it out. So you will have to kind of like click through and figure out what layer is which. So I'm going to do that right now. Now, the reason that we have to do that is because if we didn't organize all these layers and put them in their own individual layer, the file would just come in as one thing. You wouldn't have all the layers, even though there are different things in the vector file, if that makes any sense. Like, all of these are individual things, but because they weren't on their own individual layers, they would just all be connected and you wouldn't be able to animate them. So now that we separated all of them and organized them accordingly, we can now go in and animate that. And just to be safe, just to make sure, I will select everything and just make sure my colors are in the right space, which for some reason they're not. So I will convert to RGB. Good to go. Next step is After Effects. You can create a new composition if you want, or you could import that file that you just created as its own composition. So when you're importing your file, if you come down here to import as, you can select composition retain layer sizes. So I'll select that, and then you got to make sure that this is selected as well. And then once that comes in, you'll notice that you have this composition here with all of your layers laid out. And what I will do is I will edit this logo as big as possible. And I'm just doing that to really make this look as nice and clean and crisp as possible. So if we scale down the resolution, obviously there's more pixels in the image. I know it's a vector file, but once we convert it into video and all that stuff, it's now pixels. Now the one thing with After Effects is you can actually continuously rasterize the vector file as long as you just make sure that this little box is selected here with this little star icon. So I will just click and drag all the way down to make sure that is selected. Like I said, this is gonna be a pretty simple logo animation. We're not gonna be doing anything too crazy. I will actually just create a white solid just so I can see the since 1938. I'll actually delete that solid once I'm done, but I just have that on right now so that I can see everything. So basically what I wanna have happen is just the box scale up and then all of the letters individually scale up. Maybe we'll add a little bit of rotation, see how that looks. Rather than just having the logo like fade in or zoom up, it just gives a little bit more of a pop or pizzazz, if you will. We'll come into our scale and I'll say probably, oh, one thing I actually did forget. This may not be the case for you, but for me, for us, this is a TV commercial that is going to be on TV. Some of the specifications for certain stations require different frame rates. A lot of the ones that we upload to up here require it to be in 29.97, 30 frames per second. So I will need to make sure that this animation is 30 frames per second so that I don't get any issues with the sequence in Premiere afterwards. So I will just come over here up to my composition settings and just make sure I change the frame rate to 29.97. Again, that might not be the case for you. If you're doing this for just digital, social, YouTube, whatever, I would leave it as 23.976. That's like, you know, cinematic frame rate, if you will. Generally, what I like to do is have animations start at half a second, and then if it feels too fast or too slow at that point, I can kind of adjust there, but that's kind of my starting point. So since it's 30 frames per second, I will go to 15 frames and drop my scale keyframe here for 100%. I'll move the cursor all the way to the start to 0 and change my scale to 0. Next step, I'm going to select these two keyframes and add an easy ease. I like to take it a step further and mess with the graph editor and just kind of add a little bit more pop to it. If it's just an easy ease, it looks nice, but I think it could look cooler. So I'll come into graph editor up here, click on my scale, and then I'll just drag the curves pretty much all the way out. So it's kind of like a speed rampy type thing where it starts out slow, goes fast, and then ends slow. So I honestly like the speed of that. And then basically what I'm gonna do from here is every 3 frames I'll start to have the next thing come in. So I'm actually going to copy the scale because everything else is going to be the same. It's going to start out at 0 and go to 100, and I want that same little motion with the curve on there. Then I'll go to 3 frames, make sure I have my next thing that I want to come in selected, and just paste it. And then I'll go to 6 frames and do the same thing. 9 frames, same thing, so on and so forth. And now this is what we are left with. Pretty simple. So something I'm actually gonna do right now is turn off the white layer. And the reason is because I wanna make sure that none of my layers are coming in if they're not over the red, if that makes sense. Here, I'll just show you guys. So if we turn off the white layer, scrub a little backwards, we can see here, right here, I don't know if you can see that, the W is actually coming in before it's over the red box. Now, I'm not gonna change the animation at all. I'm not gonna move my keyframes, but what I will do is I will just kind of cut the clip. So what I'll do is I'll scrub forward, and once I see the white W over the red, that's where I'm gonna have the actual W show up, if you will. So I'm not gonna move my keyframe, but what I will do is I'll drag this over here, and then that's just cutting the clip. So now you can see that it's not there and then it's there. And then we can also notice the same thing for the H. And it looks like it's probably the same spot, so we'll just have it start there. That should be good for everything. Pretty simple stuff, but if you are kind of intimidated by After Effects, which I definitely was when I started, This is just a great way to kind of get your feet wet. I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions regarding anything went over, leave a comment down below. Would appreciate a like. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Ring the bell so you get notified when we post new videos. And as always, my name's Burke Cullinane, and we'll see you soon.